All right, awesome. So today we're covering reporting. Is that right, Zoe?
That is right.
Awesome. I do love reporting. I'm a nerd for it. So this will be fun. It'll be exciting. We do have the chat feature, or there is a not chat feature. Just kidding. The Q&A. If you have any questions, just go through, ping them to us, and then we'll go through and either answer them. I'll be looking at the Q&A, typing out answers, or we'll go through and we'll answer them on the screen. Cool.
Awesome. So my name is Zoe. I am an optimizer here at Vine Skills. We're going to go through some reporting. I'll go ahead and share my screen and we'll take a look at our sandbox environment. Here, we can go through the basics of reporting, and then if you have any in-depth questions on advanced things, then we can talk about that as well. To access this is your report builder here. You can go to the main menu, so the hamburger, the 3 lines in the upper left corner, and go to report builder. You'll also see saved reports there. That is helpful if you've already built reports. You can access them in your saved reports as well. So down below, we have all of these that are already built and saved. I could access them by going to saved reports. And then vice versa, if I wanted to edit any of these, I could also click the gear icon, and that would take me back to report builder to edit them as well. While we're here in saved reports, when you select a report and it runs, let's just take a look at one of our free help reports. So there's our report. I can export it to a CSV, to an Excel doc, to a Word doc. Again, the gear icon will take me back to report builder as it says there. I could edit my report, my auto report settings, or I could archive it or share it with other Filevine members in my org. If we go back to report builder, again, those same reports show up here. They're already saved. You can favorite them, archive it, or export it from here as well. And then over on the right here, we have a series of reports that we can choose from by default. So if your org, if you have multiple project types or project templates, then obviously we don't get the specifics here without selecting that project type down below. So that's where this select project type dropdown comes into play. Again, this is our sandbox, so we have a plethora of project templates. I don't recommend that you guys do the same thing, but that is how you would be able to get those more specific reports directly related to like a collection section. So looking at these reports here, this is all standard data that can be pulled into any of these. There are specifics for deadlines, for user list, things like that. You can see those here. Otherwise, a list of projects is probably the most common report that you would want to run. And that would be able to access any static data in your Filevine template. So static data is anything not in a collection section. And if we go take a look, I'll just show briefly what I mean by that. Assuming that this loads for me. Here we go. So static is any section that you click on and boom, the data is right there, versus a collection section. You have an add item button here and you're creating a Rolodex of various cards in that section. That is a collection of items. So if you wanted to run a report on a collection section, that's where we would select our specific template. I am going to choose our PI template here just to show you that automatically we get additional options here to run reports on those collection sections within that project type. In a collection report, a list of, you can also access static data. So if you had any data in your static intake section or case summary or anything else like that, you can pull that into a collection report. Let's go ahead and just do a list of projects here. So I just clicked on it. It navigated over to the next tab here to set up the columns. This is going to pull in any of the data. So any field in Filevine would be a column that you want to pull in, as well as contact data. Org name by default always shows up. You don't always need it. So just a double click on it can remove it. Same thing if I were just to click it and use the arrows over here, we could move something to the left or to the right to remove it or add it to our columns that are selected. You can also rearrange the columns here. So name is going to be your project name that displays up at the top of your project. It also displays in the project hub. Phase is also another default column, your first primary that displays on the project hub. And then project type. This is helpful if you do have multiple project templates and you simply just want to get an overall active case count and see how many cases you have in each project type. That would be super helpful. Other helpful columns are project ID. This is an auto-generated ID by Filevine that cannot be manually tampered with, so it is a reliable number to search for a project. In our general options here, we can also see the date the phase was changed, last activity. Project number is also available here. Once upon a time, that was synonymous with project ID, but Filevine has since added a field for project number. And if that field is in use, it overrides that's why they're no longer synonymous. That's where a firm is able to manually assign a number to that project. Otherwise, project number and project ID would be the same if that field is not in use. We could look at the create date of the project hashtags. So that's super helpful if you use those to report on them. And then before we select a project type, we're very limited on what we can pull in here. Client info is going to be anything from the client contact card. Org info is anything from your org setup. So if you go to setup here and then go to org, there's contact info there for your org. Then we have incident details. So incident date and project billing. Obviously, that's not all super helpful. So that's when we would want to select a specific project type to get more fields available to pull in. Let me find our personal injury template. Once that is selected, you'll notice that your list of available sections becomes longer, and you're able to get more specific data into that report. You'll also notice these two toggles here. So it's important to always select this one to display all related columns. Otherwise, you'll just see some very basic limited data. And then if you're wanting to report on anything that has been marked obsolete, if you're wanting to clean up your obsolete fields, then you would want to click this as well. Or if you're just looking at historical data to compare what was previously entered in an obsolete field and entered in a newly created field that replaced that one possibly. An example of this, I see a lot of firms have like a marital status or a language field, something along those lines, or even social security number or client date of birth in their intake because they didn't realize that that could be entered in the project contact card. Then they mark it obsolete in intake, and then there's some data cleanup to move it over to the contact card. So that's where you would want to report on those obsolete columns. Okay, so to build out my report, I want to see the project name, project type. For this report, I don't care so much about it because we know that we're going to be reporting on our personal injury one. project ID, I'm going to move up to the top phase and first primary. First primary may not be so helpful for me on this. But let's say I want to look at last activity. And then I also want to see from incident, the incident date. And I also want to go to my intake. And let's see, we could scroll. You'll notice that this is a very small scroll bar and it just gets longer. So if I wanted to see incident type, I could search here and it'll give me options. Let's go ahead and move that up. And let's say, can we make a report using source to see how many referrals we got in a month and what phase it is? Yeah, absolutely. I think we have a referral source here in our intake. So if you have that, you can absolutely pull it in. And obviously we already have phase pulled in here. You can pull any of that. If it's a field in Filevine, it can be pulled into a report. So I think that's pretty standard for a good overall view of my active cases. I can move over to choose criteria. If I want to see archived projects, there's an option up here to include those, and I would just select yes. By default, it automatically does not include archived. For this instance, I only want to see active, so I'm not going to include that. If you choose a report type and this does not show up, you can always just search for archived here to include it and double click and it'll move over to the right side. So same concept here. On the left, these are your options. And on the right, this is all of your criteria that has been applied. So let's say I am actually wanting to see cases that haven't had any activity within the last 60 days. And obviously if it's archived, that wouldn't be super helpful anyways. So I don't really need to see that on here. We'll go ahead and run that report. And this can take some time, especially if you are a larger volume firm and you have a ton of active projects. It's sorting through thousands at that point of projects and trying to find the intake or the last activity date or any of those details. Anyone can run a report. Absolutely. Whoever does, while this is loading, we can talk about some reporting etiquette. Whoever creates the report is the owner of that report and is the only person that can see that report unless it's otherwise shared. And we'll talk about that a little bit once this runs, how to share a report so that other people can access that and how you can share it with everybody in the org or specific people. I will say quickly, while this is running, I would suggest not navigating away from this page. You can go and open up another tab. So I could stay here and go open link in a new tab, but I don't want to click on any of these other tabs to choose criteria or to save and export while it's running. At this point, now that this has completed, I could then go back and add another column or add additional criteria if I needed to make an edit. But again, I want to wait until this is done running before I do that, just to prevent any kind of bugging of the report. Disrupting that run cycle can cause a bug. So here we can see a preview of all of the data that will show up on this based on the columns and the criteria that we applied. So that's when you would want to evaluate this. It only tells me I have 13 results here. If I had, it would obviously tell you if you had more. And then down at the bottom, you could adjust how many you see per page. If we navigate over to save and export, you'll notice that this page here is very limited. of what I'm able to do. So we have a save as option, or we could export to Excel or to Word. If I click save as, it will ask me to give it a name. And we'll just give it a general name here. I click save. I really wish this window would go away automatically, but you only need to click save once and then you can exit out of this. And then you'll notice once it's saved, you get more options here on the left. That does take a little bit of time. How would I add referral source? I only see source under the intake tab. It would totally depend on the name of the actual field in your section. So for us, if I go to my intake here in our sandbox, our field is called referral source. So you would just want to check your Filevine template, the field name specifically that you're trying to pull in.
And as you're getting used to running reports, I found it very helpful to have just two windows up, one with the actual where the field is in Filevine, and then one in the report builder, because Zoe could just copy and paste that referral source field name into the other one, and it would go through and it would find it.
Yeah, that's a good point. I usually, when I'm working in Filevine, have two tabs open anyways.
Same.
Okay, so now that this is saved, excuse me, you'll see our save button is grayed out, but we still have the option to save as. And then we have additional options here under our export. So again, we have options to export for Excel and Word. We could export here. This would allow us to upload a customized template here. So if, for example, we won't cover this in this video, but if you were doing a collection section export, this is where that would be helpful. You would generate your default template, use those codes. This would give you your field replacement codes, customize your template and re-upload it here. We can export to a CSV. You can set up your auto report settings. You can do weekly, monthly, or yearly. Each user has to do this for themselves. So we often get asked if we can set up an auto report for an attorney at the firm or case manager at the firm. Unfortunately, we are not able to do that. Each user has to set this up for themselves when they sign into their Filevine account. I do recommend, if you wanted a report Monday morning, to schedule it for Sunday evening. There is not a designated time. It does ask you your preferred time zone, but there's not a designated time that this report will run. It's not always going to be 7 a.m. or 8 a.m. So if you get in the office at 6 a.m. and you wanted this guaranteed in your inbox, I would run this Sunday evening. Just my helpful tip. Then you would go ahead and click save. And those auto reports, like I mentioned, they do go to your email that is associated with your Filevine account that you use to log in. Here we have the option to share the report. So if, for example, I'm going to go back to collection section exports. If that is something that you're utilizing, it has to be shared with the entire org if every single user should have access to it. Otherwise, they will not see it. And I can show you what that looks like. You know, we have one in our QuickBooks section. So here we have a collection section. And up in this corner, I just have a print icon. So we don't have a collection section export built here. If I go to my expense request, I have my print icon and I also have an Excel icon because I have a collection export that has been built with an Excel template. If it was Word, it would be a Word icon. But because we have this, if I didn't share it, if I built it and didn't share it, Derek would not be able to access it and he wouldn't be able to see that collection export. So oftentimes collection exports are helpful. in a med section. That's a collection section, and you can build that there to see total meds and everything that's been billed. And that would be super helpful for everybody to be able to use. Otherwise, you have the option to share with one-off users as needed, and I can double click to add them over to the right side, or you can search. So I could search for Derek and double click and add him, or use the arrows to remove and add. Then we're able to add this report as well.
Lewis asked if you can edit someone else's report that they have built, or if you have to save as, and you would have to go through and save that as a new report to be able to go through and edit it.
Yes, that's a good question. So as long as they've shared that report with you, you would have access to it. However, they are still the owner of it. So you would be able to access it, make your changes, and then save as a copy for yourself. Just keep in mind that when you do a save as of that new report, you would want to change that naming convention to not confuse yourself, to see their version and your version of the report. However, it does show you, if we go back to report builder here, it shows you who the owner is. So if you're looking at that from this view, you'd be able to see that all of these are going to say Vine Skills team. Oh, look, we have one that's Amy. So it does tell you who is the owner, so that is helpful. Sometimes it's nice to put your initials in there, or if it's a report that's specific to your tasks or your projects, it's nice to use your name, especially if you're sharing it with others. You're very welcome. Okay, so now it's saved. At this point, I could go back and again, add columns, and you'll notice it did change this. So it's being kind of buggy now, actually, but not a big deal. We could go back and remove this criteria. And if I want to include archived and rerun. The other cool thing here, once it's done running, at this stage, you can change the name of the report as well. And I'll show you how to do that. And then once you're done and reviewed your report and you go to save and export, all you would have to do is just save your name change. Does anybody else have any questions while this is running? Oh, look, we went up from 27 to 13. I mean, from 13 to 27. Okay, so now I can rename. So there's a little pencil icon here. I'm just going to say list of all projects. That way I know it's including archived. I can go over to save, and now my save button isn't grayed out anymore, and it lets me know that there are unsaved changes. So I can click save. And I only have to click it once. I know it doesn't give any kind of notification or reassurance that it was actually clicked, but this will go away once it's done. How many signups and rejections? Absolutely. If you're recording that in Filevine, you can absolutely see that. So I often see, I don't know if I would use, some firms have a phase for rejected. However, Filevine does not track historical phase changes. So obviously at some point that project will be archived and you won't be able to see that historical data. So the best way to track signups versus rejections would be to have a, there we go, this saved. So if I go back to, I think we have it in our best practice, possibly. It might be in our case summary. So here we have representation status, accepted, And then here we have a resolution status, whether we subbed out another attorney or we got subbed out, we settled or we withdrew. If we didn't accept, then we could add declined here, reason for declining. So as long as it's being tracked in your Filevine somewhere, then it can be reported on. Can I reference data in a report? Oh, did you answer that, Derek?
Yep.
You're awesome. Awesome. Okay. Do we want to cover collection reports?
I think we could.
Very similar to our list of projects, but we would be able then to grab data specific from that collection item. So our list of medicals, for example, I will not be able to access data from insurance, liens, expenses. I think negotiations is a collection. So when you're running a list of type of report, that automatically tells you it's a collection section. If you didn't already know that, and you can access data from that specific collection section as well as static data. So you won't be able to access any other collection data. Here we have a couple different naming conventions. In our list of projects, we had name, which was the project name, and here it just says project name. Those are the same thing. And you'll notice down below, this was a sticky setting since we clicked it on our last report. It's already clicked here. And then because we are doing a collection report, we don't have to select our project type down at the bottom. That is automatically applied and selected from our first page being selected there. So here we get the option to choose data from each medical item. So we can choose our provider first name. Sometimes maybe not super helpful. I always like to use provider full name. So I'm just going to type that out and select that and remove the first name. We have the final balance due, but I probably also want to see how much was billed. So if I search billed, we get no results. What if we have original balance? Perfect. So if you don't know the name of your fields, you can try trial and error like that, or like Derek mentioned previously, I could go to that section, open up a blank item, and copy paste the field that I'm looking for. And it'll give that to me specific. Let's see. I definitely want to know those two, so I know the value of my case. Maybe it'd be helpful to see date treatment started and completed. It could be helpful. If this is no, maybe that's the criteria we want to use. We only want to see if they're done treating. And then maybe if I'm a medical records specialist at the firm, I want to run a report where I've requested records, but I haven't received them. So let's go ahead and actually run that. Let's do records requested date here. And I think those are all the columns I actually want to pull in. And I'm going to copy that and go over to my criteria and paste that in here. So records received date. That one's not super helpful. This is going to make me enter in a specific date when I just want to see if it's empty. So if I look at my other criteria options, there's one here that is specific for it to be empty, to know that I haven't received those records, or if I have, that I haven't documented that they've been received. So if this would be a helpful check. If I know for certain that we've received records and they're still showing up on this, then that means I haven't done a good job of marking that off in Filevine. We'll let that run. And I didn't include archived projects on this because if I'm looking at outstanding records that haven't been obtained, archived isn't going to be super helpful. We either rejected that, closed it, they fired us, something like that. So whether we received those records or not may not be super relevant for our workflow. Super fun while we wait for these. And again, if you have a ton of projects and a ton of data in Filevine, this can take some time. That's very, very normal. Okay, we have 16 results here. We could also add in, so you'll notice it looks like we only have one that I've actually requested records on. So another criteria that you could do to clean that up is records requested date. And to pull that in as criteria, so if we go back here, choose criteria and add this, is empty, no. The other thing that might be helpful while doing this kind of report is whether or not you use this criteria, are they still treating no or date treatment completed? So we could do, just so you can see something that's different than a date. If I wanted to use that as criteria, it only gives me one option here, and I want it to equal no. So I want to make sure that they are done treating. We're not going to order records before that. Otherwise, we're just doing duplicate record requests, which sometimes we need to do. Or the other option would be to use another date field. So if this has a date, then you would use that. I don't think we're going to have much data that pulls into this, but when using multiple criteria like that, it's only going to show you projects that meet all three criteria. It's not going to show you projects that meet one of the three or two of the three. It needs to meet 3 of 3, that we have 3 applied. So that's something to keep in mind. Mm-hmm.
Our sandbox is running nice and slow today.
Yeah.
It's all the templates.
It is all of our project templates. So like I mentioned in the beginning, obviously in our sandbox, we have a ton of project types. And I did say that I don't recommend that you guys replicate that in your orgs. And the reason, one of the biggest reasons, is that having several project types will slow down your reporting. There's so much data that it's trying to sort through. Even if you select a specific project type, Filevine still has to sort it to find it. Okay, so it looks like we have one project here where treatment is completed, records have been requested, and we have not received those records yet. That was done in 2022. They're slacking here. We could go
Need
ahead.
to follow up.
Yeah, we really need to follow up on our sandbox records requests. We could go ahead and save this. I'm not going to, just for the sake of keeping our reporting in our sandbox a little bit cleaner, but you did see those options previously with our list of projects report. Do we have any other questions here? Or Derek, is there anything else that I should cover?
I think it might be good maybe to just take a look at maybe the Word template and the Excel template if you're going to go through and customize those.
Oh, good idea. Let's go to my saved report. I always like to refresh my browser when I'm hopping in between reports as well, just to make sure that I'm starting with a clean slate, and not confusing Filevine, or I'm OCD about bugging my reports, so that will also help make sure that that doesn't happen. Let's see, free help, list of all projects. So once I click that from here, it does take a minute, but it will automatically take me over to run. And again, while it's running, I don't want to navigate away from this or disrupt that run cycle. We'll let that go. It shouldn't take too long. And I know that this is a list of projects, so it's not a collection report that could be used for a collection section export, but you can still customize it. And that just means or allows you to customize the template and the way it looks when you export it. So now that it's run, we go over to save and export, and we have the option here for Excel or Word. I think I'll have to share my whole browser to see the different options for my whole desktop. And this can take a minute to generate. It's just pushing all of that data into an Excel. Shows up as a download. Awesome. So that's what that looks like in Excel. Looks very similar to the way it pulls up in Filevine. And if we wanted to open it in Word, we'll take a look at that as well.
The Word one might take a little bit longer.
Generally, Excel is my preferred, and it's tends to be a lot easier to work with, especially if the report that you're using involves any kind of numerical value, that you need to have equations to sum up or calculate things for you. Excel is much friendlier to that. So Word, instead of displaying in columns, you get these little blocks of data for each project. So in Excel, you get a row for the project, and then Word, it displays in a repeating block of text, essentially. If I want to customize the way this looks, we could do that in both. Again, I prefer Excel. So I'll go ahead and go back to Filevine here and export options. I'm going to generate my default template for Excel and go ahead and open that up. And I'm sure these look familiar. They are very similar to DocGen codes, or your field selectors is also what they're called. These can also be found on the back end of Filevine and Customs Editor, and they are generated by default when you're creating a field. It wasn't until recently that anyone outside of Filevine, or at least us at Vine Skills, were able to edit them, but generally they're not editable after the fact that a field is created. So if we want to edit this template, I could go ahead and do that. Let me see. You're typing?
Yep.
So if I want to edit this, for example, we can go ahead and imagine I had criteria on this and it was only my projects. So I could call this Zoe's projects. I could add a column or a code up here, for example. So if this was a collection export where only one project is applicable, I could take this code and put it up here as well. And when you run that collection in that given project, it will then have that project name up here instead of for every collection item, it would just repeat that project name. So it will work that way as well. Same thing for the project ID. This would be the same. The phase would be the same. All of these things would be the same. You would just have your collection items here. You'll notice when I hover, we get that note there that's begin repeat and end repeat. For a collection report, that is going to allow each collection item to generate a new line item or a row here in Excel. Because this is a static report, I'm just going to revert back to how it was. That begin and end repeat allows each project here to generate as a new row. So that's why it looks like this.
And if you were to move that end repeat down, let's say like 3 rows, then there would be all of those blank rows between each of your entries too as well.
Yes.
It's a lot of just trial and error too with this format on where you have your start and your end repeats.
Yes. Some other nice things that I like to do on templates is add a filter. So then when you run this and you open an Excel, you'll be able to filter these columns. So if I wanted to filter the phase, I could do that. You could also do banded rows if you like to see every other row as a different color. That's super fun to do. You could change the color, font, size, anything like that on the template. Anything that you change here. So if I were to save this, that's all the changes I want to make, and go back to Filevine and upload that here. This will allow me to generate a new document with my changes, and it will confirm that it's been uploaded. Now, if I want to regenerate that, and since I've uploaded a custom Excel template, my Word option goes away. Let's see if it will let me. It's thinking.
Did it say it looked like it stopped on you?
I think it did. I think it timed out. Okay, go back to it. Okay. This session flew by.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it really did.
Reporting can be so much fun.
It's one of my favorite things.
It is. I will be honest. I worked at Filevine previously and I hated reporting. And then I joined Vine Skills, and Derek actually sparked my love for it and my love for customizing. Reporting is a ton of fun. Okay.
Like, yeah, fun. It could be a fun challenge, but definitely rewarding.
Absolutely. The most rewarding when all of your data is actually being entered in Filevine appropriately, and then you're able to use
Have a
your
nice report. Yeah.
have a nice report that's actually helpful to see your KPIs or whatever it is. KPIs are huge, very important. So you'll see here, I had those 3 blank rows up at the top of my template and my filter. So those both saved, and now I can filter and say I only want to see my archived projects, for example. So it
And
filters volume.
because you did run this with all of your phases in it too, then you could potentially use this for multiple things as well. If you filtered it to say you only wanted this phase for, cases in closing, then you could lose all that other data. So think about that too. What all things are you going to want to learn from your report, and then determine, hey, do I want to filter this in Filevine, or do I want to filter it on my report itself?
That's another good point too, because if you applied the criteria for a specific phase, then you would have duplicate reports that could just bog up your report builder or your saved reports if you were to have archived only, file setup only, closing only, versus being able to utilize Excel and the filtering here with one report and get 2 birds with 1 stone. Super powerful. Okay. I think that's about it for reporting basics.
I am going to go through in our webinar chat, and I'm just going to link to our free help section on vineskills.com. There's a bunch of us on the VineSkills team. We've gone through and we've done these free help sessions, and we record them. So eventually this one will go through to appear on there as well. So definitely check that out if you're looking for more information. There's so many different videos on there and so many just learning materials in general. I encourage you to go through and look. And then 2, before we go, if you have any questions, you're interested or you want to learn more, anything like that, I'm just going to paste in Zoe's and my emails addresses. Just go ahead and send us an email and what's going on, maybe what you're looking at, and then we can go through and potentially get you set up and get you taken care of.
Absolutely.
Cool.
All right, y'all. Thank you everyone for joining. Have a fantastic week and weekend celebrating Father's Day if you're fathers.